For today's discussion, we won't be focusing specifically on the COVID situation, but we are going to be talking about some of the solutions that can overcome the increasing challenges presented by the current pandemic. As I mentioned, I'm Sean Lowry with Lowry Solutions. We're a solution provider specializing in supply chain solutions for traceability and visibility, with a particular focus on enterprise mobility and managed print services technology. I'm very excited to be joined by Ron Pogson this morning. Ron will be sharing valuable insights with us from his 30 years of experience as a logistics industry executive. A couple housekeeping notes before we get started. We'd like to make this virtual session as interactive as possible. It is a live session, but we will have the audience muted during the discussion. However, we encourage everyone to use the chat at the bottom of the screen to submit any questions along the way. Ron and I will be addressing those questions live at the end of the discussion. And to keep things interactive, we'll be presenting a polling question during the discussion. We'd ask the audience to take a moment to respond to that. And lastly, the session is being recorded, and that recording will be shared with all attendees in the coming days. Well, Ron, again, thanks for joining me today. Can you please share a little more about your background in the logistics industry?
Yes, thank you for the introduction, Sean. It's a pleasure to be here today, and good morning to everyone on the call. As Sean mentioned, I've been in the transportation industry in an IT capacity for over 30 years. I came up the ranks of the application development and implementation side of IT. And for the last 15 years or so, I was the director of information technology for two courier divisions of TFI International, Canpar Courier and Loomis Express. Combined, we managed over 3,500 mobile devices and delivered over 50 million packages a year.
Great. So today, Ron and I will be discussing, again, more about his past experiences in the logistics industry and how he sought to implement technology solutions to improve their operational efficiencies. So Ron, jumping right into it, can you provide some context as to why you were looking at implementing technology solutions in your past roles?
So a little more history. My first involvement in the mobile device world and track and trace software was in the early 90s. Back then, devices were heavy, DOS-based, three-line text screens with no touch capability, no cameras, no GPS, or not even cellular connectivity. All device communication was done in batch mode at the end of the day, so they were merely just barcode scanners. While this technology popularized the world of barcodes, it didn't eliminate signatures on paper or give any real-time updates. Then came the 2000s. iOS and Android came to market along with all the cool apps and hardware we enjoy today, and it was quickly becoming a connected world. So newer mobile devices for couriers hit the market as well, with more bells and whistles. We adapted to the new world of handhelds the best we could by shoehorning some of those tech advances into our legacy systems. Now we have the 2010s and into today, and the accelerating push for e-commerce and the B2C courier delivery market growth. The challenge for us was our legacy systems were built for a B2B market, and the cost to support and maintain these systems was increasing substantially. And upgrading was a very difficult and costly task. The B2B market built our business on mainly fixed driver routes, visiting the same customers each and every day and delivering to the stores and businesses. While the B2C market, it created the need to be flexible to the ever-changing route structures to service our customers' now on-demand pickup requests and support the multiple delivery options they were expecting.
Well, excellent examples of both the industry and the technology evolving. So Ron, one of the questions is where do folks even start? There are a lot of options in finding a solution for a company today. How did your team approach the evaluation?
So there's three main options to look at. The first one, you could develop the solution in-house. Now, for in-house developed solutions, our main pros is that you have full control over both your requirements and your resources. The cons, however, slow development time, as your IT team has other tasks in their day, and slow deployment as your resources are limited. Of note, too, your development team will be making enhancements to the software for years as the business continues to change and grow, and ultimately your costs will continue to grow.
Yeah, and Ron, I think many organizations are utilizing much more outsourced IT resources today, and some organizations simply just do not have the needed human resources and or are trying to do more with less. I imagine you looked at what the market could offer to achieve a solution as well.
Yep, outsourcing your development is most certainly an option to look at. This option also gives you full control on the requirements. However, you're now dealing with developers that likely have never been in the transportation industry. An obvious requirement to you will turn out very different in the result. Thus, slow development and deployment remains as a con, but on top of that, the testing phase will be extremely heavy to ensure your outsourced partner got everything right. In the end, total cost of ownership will be very expensive.
Yeah, and I think while there could be many benefits to getting a bespoke solution for your organization, you certainly articulated some of the drawbacks as well. So we see many companies looking to leverage commercially available solutions. What were some of the considerations when looking at existing solutions in the marketplace?
So SaaS, or software as a service model, some might refer to this as off-the-shelf software, was our preferred approach. You gain and leverage the best practices of all other couriers and users of the software. You'll have a system that can manage the ever-changing technologies of hardware, operating systems, and the ever-increasing security needs. You'll be able to leverage the software service model to deploy quickly across your organization without having to cycle devices back in for upgrades. Now, perhaps the one con to consider when looking at a SaaS model in general, while the systems are flexible and configurable to the needs of your business, there might be some small process changes required to accommodate its best use.
So Ron, I'd like to pause for a moment. I think we're going to go ahead and put the poll up now for the audience. Many folks from different legacy system perspectives, curious to understand where they might be at in their journey today. Yeah, so it looks like a little bit kind of to be expected, right? Some folks starting out from a very manual process and some today already having full-scale solutions in place. Probably some falling in the middle there as well. And one of the things, Ron, I know that it becomes a topic of conversation right now more and more because you mentioned Android earlier. And a lot of the legacy devices were Windows operating systems. So companies are now becoming forced to shift to this Android platform and therefore having to really reevaluate updating their legacy systems. So Ron, one of the things I guess I'm curious to hear about is the total solution, right? I mean, I just referenced Android. What was everything that you and your team identified as key requirements? And I guess really what beyond the cloud software was required to improve upon your legacy system?
Yeah, three things. When designing our full solution, we needed to refresh our fleet with new ruggedized handhelds with supported, secure, and upgradable operating systems. We needed to remove the IT workload and the unpredictable costs of repair by contracting experts in supporting and maintaining our hardware, as this was not the core strength of our team. And we needed to select a secure, flexible software that can deploy quickly and easily to thousands of devices.
So, Ron, you mentioned quickly and easily there. Jumping on that, like how long does an implementation for a project like this typically take?
Throughout my career, I've been involved in each of the previously discussed options of systems development. One big reason for choosing a SaaS model like ShipTrack is the speed of deployment. with very little development effort because the system is ready built. And once the system is configured to your requirements, you can roll out to your drivers. In our case, we did entire facilities or regions at a time, covering a couple hundred drivers at each stage. Start to finish was only a few short months for 125 facilities and 3,500 devices.
Wow. That's actually quite fast considering the scope of your enterprise. And I do know it can be a bit of a loaded question because on the opposite end of the spectrum, familiar that ShipTrack's been able to get smaller organizations up and running in as little as 2 weeks. Again, I think largely due to the SaaS technology. So, Ron, I think everyone joining today is familiar with the couriers like FedEx and UPS, and now more than ever, Amazon. I know it seems like we're getting Amazon Prime deliveries almost on a daily basis in my household. But we've seen drivers, scanning the packages with devices, or in the past maybe even asked to sign on a device for a package. I imagine you use similar technology for your solution?
We certainly did have that technology. However, as many as of you know, delivery drivers can be very tough on handheld computers. So we needed rugged devices that could support that abuse from manufacturers that were investing heavily in these technologies. And we needed to have our repairs managed by a lifecycle services partner who could also manage our spares pool and thus maintain our service levels at a predictable cost. With thousands of drivers, we also knew that even though devices were rugged, a certain percentage were going to need repair. Trust me, it is inevitable that a device will fall off the seat of a truck, or fall out of the holster to the ground, be left on a bumper of a truck, get run over, fall in a puddle, or be left in the rain for hours. In my experience, it happens with surprising regularity. True story, a few years back while a driver was delivering on a country route, he stopped for a bio break at a cottage outhouse. And yes, you guessed it, the device fell out of his holster and down the hole.
Oh.
Not a pleasant thought. Kudos to the driver, he somehow fished it out, put the device in a Ziploc bag, and shipped it back to our service provider. We, of course, warned them ahead of time, but believe it or not, that device worked as tests were done through the Ziploc bag. In the end, however, we did decide to put that device out of service. My point, if you think it won't happen, it most certainly will. You should consider a 5 to 10% spare pool of devices to handle this.
Boy, glad I was not the service tech receiving that device in. So, Ron, moving from the hardware to the software technology, earlier you alluded to the advantages of software as a service-based technology. Can you elaborate on some of those benefits for us?
Yeah, the old challenges of premise-based software where we were responsible for paying for maintenance agreements and the infrastructure to run it and expensive upgrades if the vendor was even willing to make them at all was now in the past. Software as a service has changed the economics of how companies can leverage software to manage and grow their business.
Ron, it's interesting you mentioned economics. I often have conversations where end users are evaluating a solution from a CapEx versus an OpEx budgetary perspective. Was that true with your evaluation?
Absolutely true. It was part of our equation. With capital expense, you have an upfront cash outlay with the cost written off over the life of the project, typically 3 to 5 years. You'll then be confronted with a new capital expense to refresh the system at new and likely higher costs, and the cycle will continue. With operating expenses, you have a predictable, transactional-based pay-per-use cost that can fluctuate through your business volumes. So after years of the capital cost roller coaster, we chose the OpEx approach that ShipTrack provided us.
Ron, something else I always hear is, our business is unique. We don't do things like other companies, which certainly I think can oftentimes be true. How were you able to customize the solution and specifically the ShipTrack software to suit your needs?
One of the unique aspects of ShipTrack is their approach to service enterprise accounts. They're professional and experienced, and they customized our implementation based on how we wanted to operate our business. What I mean is their system is adaptable for many different use cases and workflows right out of the box. It was also very reassuring to know that feature enhancements and upgrades are included as part of the service. So after 8 years in operation, this future-proofing approach has resulted in a very powerful tool with hundreds of features. For our project, the ShipTrack implementation team included a project manager, a technical account manager, and training services with materials they developed specifically for our drivers. The driver app only takes about 10 minutes to learn, and ShipTrack also customized some of the training aids for us, like visor cards, PDF documentation, and videos.
Oh, great. So Rod, there's clearly a lot of moving parts and lots of detailed work to be done to deploy a solution like we're discussing. What did the partner do for you that your organization chose not to do or handle, or didn't necessarily have the bandwidth or the resources to handle?
Yeah, quite simply, we were a courier company, not an IT firm. With thousands of devices in the field, limited IT budgets and resources, it was critical for us to use the resources we had where they were needed most. And by outsourcing our software, we needed to feel comfortable that our support services firm and our successful software vendor would be working together as a team.
Can you share some light on the services or what in particular the solution provider was able to do on your behalf?
We were able to contract with a lifecycle services firm that was able to deliver a customized package of services. This included deployment and kitting of the devices, gold image management, spares management, repairs management, and ongoing user support. If a driver needed a replacement unit, a fully configured and tested device was waiting on site or delivered. Spares inventories were all managed by our provider. The service portion is critical to ensure your drivers remain productive, as moving back to a paper-based system is not really an acceptable backup plan. And for ShipTrack, they already had processes in place to support our users directly post-implementation. They also work closely with our hardware support firm during the pre-deployment phase in configuring and testing our devices with the software to ensure they were 100% functional and ready to go.
Thank you for the overview. So, Ron, I want to be cognizant of the time and make sure we can address some questions. We have received some questions here from the audience. But before we do that, can you just briefly summarize the success you achieved with the project?
Yes. So as I shared previously in our business challenges slide, we needed to become more flexible, adaptable, and manage our expenses. Referencing this slide, our bottom line was positively impacted by improved efficiencies resulting from automating many of our operational processes. We were able to substantially free up our internal IT resources by outsourcing device management and repair. The configurability of the software meant we were able to service both our B2B and our B2C customers who appreciated the increased visibility they had on their deliveries. And finally, something I hadn't mentioned yet, I had real-time performance data, so no more guesswork for our operations management or phone calls to drivers to find out where they were and how much work they had left in their day. All these results were proof that our investment was paying off.
Ron, I want to thank you for joining me today and thank the audience for their time as well. If there is additional information and or demo of the software, they can certainly visit Lowry Solutions website or the ShipTrack website directly. We have some phone numbers and emails listed as well. We'd be happy to follow up on any specific questions and, as I mentioned, schedule a demo. So thank you, Ron. Appreciate your time. And
thanks, Sean. It was a pleasure. I hope it was helpful.
Very much so. So have a good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us.